A millionaire enters his daughter's room, ready to fire the humble nanny he found sleeping on the cold floor of the mansion. He believes she has crossed unforgivable boundaries, not imagining what was truly happening in the early hours of the morning. But everything falls apart when he sees his quadruplet daughters clinging to her, trembling with fear and begging not to lose her. And in that instant, the millionaire realizes that the scene before him reveals a truth capable of changing his entire family. The mansion on the Upper East Side seemed to swallow any sound that dared to disturb it. William adjusted his tie in front of the entryway mirror, observing his reflection without truly seeing himself. 42 years old, hair beginning to grey at the temples, eyes that hadn't slept properly in 6 months. The clock read 5:40 in the morning, and he was already dressed, briefcase in hand, ready for another day of meetings that would keep him away until late at night. Before opening the door, he heard it. A muffled cry coming from the second floor. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath. Amelia or Eleanor? Charlotte or Olivia? Impossible to distinguish. The 4 5-year-old girls cried practically every night, each at her own time, as if they had established a cruel relay of suffering. He gripped the handle of his briefcase tighter. The new nanny would know how to handle it. That's what he paid her so well for. He left without looking back, letting the door close with a soft click that echoed across the cold marble of the hall. On the second floor, Megan, the 4th nanny in 3 months, looked at the 4 beds arranged in the gigantic room with a mixture of exhaustion and defeat. She had arrived just a week ago, full of impeccable references and a degree in early childhood education. Now, with deep dark circles under her eyes and her hands trembling with fatigue, she was beginning to understand why the other 3 had given up. Amelia was curled up under the bed, sobbing softly. Eleanor had woken up screaming at 3 in the morning and was now finally asleep, but her sleep was restless, punctuated by pained moans. Charlotte remained awake, her wide eyes fixed on the ceiling, refusing to close her eyelids even after 2 hours, and Olivia, the youngest by just a few minutes according to hospital records, was in the bathroom for the 3rd time that night, nauseous from panic. Megan knelt beside the bed where Amelia was hiding. The girl's face was wet with tears, her brown hair stuck to her sweaty forehead. "She's here," Amelia whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. "I saw her in the hallway." "It's just a dream, sweetie," Megan tried, reaching out her hand. "Your mother isn't here." Amelia recoiled further, pressing her back against the wall. "I know she's not here. She left us." The shout startled Eleanor awake, who immediately began to cry as well. Charlotte squeezed her eyes shut, covering her ears with her hands. From the bathroom, they heard the sound of Olivia throwing up. Megan felt tears welling up. She was good with children. She always had been. But this was beyond her capabilities. 4 girls, 4 simultaneous pains, 4 worlds of suffering she simply couldn't reach. At 7 in the morning, when Grace rang the service entrance bell, she was greeted by a puffy-eyed Megan. "Are you the new maid?" the nanny asked, her voice tired. "Yes, ma'am." Grace Evans for cleaning and cooking. Grace was 38, but she seemed to carry the weight of many more years. Her brown eyes had the depth that comes from knowing losses too great to be spoken aloud. She came from Elmira, upstate New York, where she had left behind an empty house and memories that still woke her in the middle of the night. The employment agency had made it clear that the position was only for domestic services. Mr. William Blackwood was not looking for a nanny. He already had one, or 2, or 3. Grace wasn't sure, but she could tell from the tone of the woman at the agency that the subject was delicate. Mrs. Davies, the housekeeper, appeared to welcome her. She was a stern woman in her 60s who had worked at the mansion for 2 decades. She had seen Beatrice arrive as a radiant bride, had witnessed the difficult pregnancy with the quadruplets, had been present for every moment of the Blackwood family's life. And now, 6 months after the tragedy, she was trying to keep the house running while everything around it seemed to be falling apart. "You will be responsible for cleaning the guest rooms, the living room, the kitchen, and the service areas," Mrs. Davies instructed, leading Grace through the immense corridors. Mr. Blackwood's room and his study are cleaned only by me, and the girl's room is the nanny's responsibility." Grace nodded, absorbing every piece of information. The mansion was even larger than she had imagined. 3 floors, 8 suites, 5 bathrooms, a living room, a dining room, a library, a study, a game room, a gym, an indoor pool. A palace that seemed frozen in time, as if waiting for someone to return and bring it back to life. "Any questions?" Mrs. Davies asked, stopping in front of the kitchen. "Where is the girls' room?" Mrs. Davies looked at her with a certain suspicion. "Second floor, east wing. But as I said, it is not your responsibility." "I was just getting my bearings," Grace explained quickly, "so I don't go where I shouldn't." The housekeeper seemed to accept the explanation and left her alone in the kitchen. Grace began her work in silence, familiarizing herself with each space. The kitchen was modern, equipped with everything one could imagine, but it had the air of a place rarely used. She opened the refrigerator and found only basic items, frozen, food, nothing that indicated home-cooked meals. She spent the day cleaning, organizing, trying to bring some order to the immense space. Mrs. Davies appeared from time to check her work, always with that severe expression, but Grace could see that behind the hardness there was fatigue. The housekeeper was holding that house together on her own, and the weight was visible. Late in the afternoon, while cleaning the living room, Grace heard agitated voices coming from the hall. It was Megan, the nanny, with a suitcase in her hand. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Davies, but I can't continue. I'm not sleeping, I'm not able to help the girls, I just can't do it." Mrs. Davies tried to argue, but Megan's determination was clear. The nanny was at her breaking point. Grace watched discreetly from the living room as Megan left through the front door, leaving behind another desertion. "It's 4 against 1, she heard Mrs. Davies mutter to herself, her voice heavy with worry. "How are we going to find someone willing to face 4 at once?" Grace went back to her work, but those words echoed in her mind. 4 girls, quadruplets, 5 years old, the same. Age her own children would be now if that fateful day 5 years ago hadn't happened. She closed her eyes, pushing the memories away. It wasn't the time for that. At 7 in the evening, when she finished her tasks, Mrs. Davies informed her that she could go to her room. "You'll be in the room in the service wing, 3rd floor. It's small, but it has what you need." Grace climbed the narrow stairs that led to the 3rd floor, where the staff quarters were located. The room was indeed small, with a single bed, an old wardrobe, and a window that overlooked the back of the property. But it was clean, and it had a door that closed. It was more than many had. She sat on the bed, listening to the sounds of the house. Downstairs, she could hear Mrs. Davies preparing something in the kitchen, the heavy silence of the rest of the mansion. And then, as if waiting for night to fall, it began. A cry, coming from the 2nd floor. Grace remained still, listening. It wasn't just one cry, it was cries. Multiple, overlapping, creating a symphony of suffering that rose through the stairs and passed through the walls. She tried to lie down to cover her ears with the pillow, but the cries continued, persistent, desperate. They were cries she knew all too well, cries of children who had lost something precious and didn't know how to go on living with that hole inside their chests. She got up, went to the window. The night was clear, stars dotting the New York City sky despite the light pollution. She remembered when she used to look at the stars with her own children, Gabriel and Michael, twins who had filled her life with light, for just 7 years before a truck with no brakes turned everything to darkness. The cries continued. One of them intensified, becoming a scream. Grace clenched her hands, fighting the urge to leave her room. It wasn't her place. She was just the maid. Mrs. Davies had made that very clear. But then she heard hurried footsteps, Mrs. Davies's tense voice trying to calm the children. The housekeeper was alone with 4 girls in crisis, with no nanny, no help, and the screams only grew louder. Grace couldn't stay still. She left her room, went down the stairs to the 2nd floor. The door to the girls' room was open, and the scene she found made her heart ache. Mrs. Davies was in the center of the room, trying to calm Eleanor, who was crying inconsolably. Amelia was under the bed again, refusing to come out. Charlotte had locked herself in the wardrobe, banging on the door from the inside. and Olivia was huddled in a corner, trembling violently. "Mrs. Davies, can I help?" Grace offered from the doorway. The housekeeper looked at her, and for the first time her mask of control cracked. There were tears in the older woman's eyes. "I don't know what to do anymore. They wake up like this every night. One, then another, then all of them together. There hasn't been a peaceful night in months." Grace entered the room slowly. She looked at each girl, saw the suffering multiplied by 4, saw distorted reflections of her own children in those tormented little faces. "Let me try," she said softly. "You're the cleaning lady," Mrs. Davies began, but exhaustion overcame any protocol. "Please, try." Grace approached the bed where Amelia was hiding first. She didn't try to pull her out. She simply sat on the floor beside it. "I used to hide under the bed when I was your age too," she said quietly. "It was the only place I felt safe." Amelia stopped sobbing for a moment, curious despite her fear. "Why?" "Because under the bed was like a secret cave, my private hideout. No one could reach me there." "And did it work?" "Sometimes yes, sometimes no." "But you know what always worked?" Grace extended her hand under the bed, leaving it there without forcing. "Having someone waiting when I decided to come out." Amelia looked at the outstretched hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, her little fingers touched Grace's. She didn't come out yet, but contact had been made. Meanwhile, Grace continued to speak, her voice low and steady, directed not just at Amelia, but at all the girls in the room. She spoke of stars, of how each star in the sky had a story, of how the people we love never truly disappear, because there's always a star guarding their memories. Charlotte stopped banging on the wardrobe door, listening. Eleanor's sobs lessened, leaning against Mrs. Davies but paying attention to Grace's words. Olivia raised her head, still trembling, but with her eyes fixed on this unknown woman who spoke so gently. The night would still be long, but something had changed. For the first time in months, the 4 girls were not alone in their terror. There was a new presence in that house, someone who knew the language of loss and knew that sometimes the only thing we can do is sit on the floor next to someone and wait for the darkness to pass. Grace spent that first night sitting on the floor of the girls' room, alternating between the 4 beds as each one needed her. Mrs. Davies had given up arguing around midnight and gone down to rest, making it clear that this was an exception and would not be repeated. But they both knew it was a lie. There was no nanny anymore, and someone needed to be there. Amelia was the first to finally come out from under the bed around 2 in the morning. Grace didn't force her, just continued sitting there, quietly telling stories about the stars, about how each one had a different glow. When the girl emerged, her eyes red and her hair tangled, Grace simply opened her arms. Amelia hesitated for only a second before throwing herself into that embrace, sobbing against the shoulder of this woman she barely knew, but who somehow seemed to understand. Charlotte came out of the wardrobe half an hour later, drawn by Grace's soft voice. She was the most observant of the 4, with large, attentive eyes that seemed to capture every detail. She sat near Grace without saying anything, just leaning her shoulder against hers, as if testing whether this presence was real or another one of the dreams that deceived her every night. Eleanor was more difficult. She kept waking up at short intervals, startled, looking around as if she didn't recognize her own room. Each time, Grace was there, a gentle hand on her shoulder, a calm voice saying it was all right, that she was safe. Gradually, the intervals between her awakenings began to lengthen. Olivia remained in the corner until almost dawn, trembling, her arms wrapped around her knees. Grace respected her distance, but always maintained eye contact when the girl looked in her direction, a small, encouraging smile that silently said she could take all the time she needed. When the sun began to paint the sky pink through the windows, the 4 girls were finally asleep. It wasn't a deep sleep, not a restorative one, but it was something. Grace covered them carefully, one by one, observing those little faces marked by suffering. They were so small, so fragile. How was it possible that 4 such delicate creatures could carry so much weight? She went down to the kitchen at 6 in the morning, finding Mrs. Davies already making coffee. You were up there all night." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Mrs. Davies poured a cup of coffee for Grace. "You shouldn't have done that. Mr. Blackwood is very strict about everyone's roles here. The children needed someone. They need a professional nanny. You were hired to clean and cook." Grace took a sip of the hot coffee, feeling the exhaustion in her bones. "Then we'll need to hire a new nanny quickly. We've been trying for weeks. No one wants to stay. The girls are very difficult." "They're not difficult," Grace corrected gently. "They're grieving. It's different." Mrs. Davies looked at her with an expression Grace couldn't quite decipher. There was something between respect and warning in those tired eyes. "Mr. Blackwood leaves at 6. You can prepare the girls' breakfast, but when he comes back tonight, keep your distance. He doesn't like interference." Grace nodded, understanding. She spent the next few hours cleaning the dining room and the library, but her mind remained on the second floor. Around 9, she heard footsteps coming down the stairs. The girls had woken up. She entered the kitchen to find them sitting at the table, still in their pajamas, with Mrs. Davies serving cereal and milk. The four were silent, taking mechanical spoonfuls without any enthusiasm. They seemed to be performing a mandatory task, not enjoying a meal. "Good morning, girls," Grace greeted from the doorway. 4 pairs of eyes turned to her. Amelia was the first to smile, a shy but genuine smile. Charlotte nodded. Eleanor glanced quickly before returning her attention to her cereal. Olivia just stared, still cautious. "Grace," Mrs. Davies called her, a warning tone in her voice. "There's work waiting." "Of course, Mrs. Davies. I just came to get a cloth from the kitchen." But as she grabbed the cloth, she watched the girls. Their clothes were too loose, their faces too pale, their movements too slow. This wasn't just fatigue from a bad night's sleep. It was the accumulated exhaustion of months. During the day, she kept busy with her tasks, but she was always attentive to the sounds of the house. The girls played in their room, if you could call it playing. They were too quiet, too restrained. 5-year-old children should make noise, run, laugh. These 4 seemed to have forgotten how. In the afternoon, while cleaning the second-floor hallway, she heard an argument in the girls' room. "I don't want to sleep." It was Eleanor's voice, loud and scared. "When I sleep, she comes and then she leaves again." "You need to sleep," Mrs. Davies's voice, patient but firm. "All children take naps." "But I don't want to see her. I don't want to see her, and then remember she's gone." Grace stopped cleaning, her heart aching. She approached the ajar door and saw Eleanor in the center of the room, tears streaming down her face, while Mrs. Davies tried to convince her to lie down. The other 3 girls watched from their beds, tense. "Mrs. Davies, may I try?" Grace offered quietly from the door. The housekeeper sighed, defeated. "Please." Grace entered and knelt at Eleanor's level. The girl was trembling, her fists clenched. "You dream about your mom, don't you?" Eleanor nodded, more tears welling up. "She's there, and she's smiling, and she hugs me. But when I wake up, she's gone. And it hurts so much." Grace held out her hand, waiting. Eleanor took it, squeezing tightly. "Can I tell you a secret?" Grace lowered her voice, as if it were just between the 2 of them, though she knew the other 3 were listening to every word. "I have dreams like that too, with people I love very much who had to go away." "And what do you do?" Charlotte asked from her bed, her voice small and curious. "I learned that dreams aren't our enemies. They're gifts. They're moments where we can see the ones we love again, even if it's just for a little while." Grace sat on the floor and Eleanor sat in her lap. "You know what I do when I wake up and feel that pain?" "What?" Amelia moved closer, sitting beside them. "I say thank you. I thank them for that moment, even if it was in a dream. And then I talk to the stars." "The stars?" Olivia spoke for the first time, her voice hoarse from so much silence. "Yes, because the people we love don't disappear completely. They become stars, and the stars are always there, even when we can't see them during the day. They're there watching over us, taking care of us." "Is my mommy a star?" Eleanor asked, still in Grace's lap. "The brightest star of all. And you know what stars do? They send light to us. Even from so far away, their light reaches us here. It's like a hug from afar." Amelia climbed onto the bed next to where they were. "Can you teach us how to talk to the stars? I can, but it only works at night when we can see them shining. So you'll stay at night again? Charlotte asked, hopeful. Grace looked at Mrs. Davies, who stood at the door with a conflicted expression. The housekeeper finally nodded, a silent permission. I'll stay as many nights as you need me. The girls looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them. Then, as if they had reached an agreement, all four moved closer to Grace, forming a circle around her. Do you promise? Amelia asked. I promise. That afternoon passed differently. The girls didn't sleep, but they were calmer. Grace told stories while pretending to clean the room, stories about constellations, about how different cultures saw the stars, about the vastness of the universe. Mrs. Davies said nothing, just allowed it to continue. When the clock struck 7 in the evening, Mrs. Davies called Grace to the kitchen. Mr. Blackwood will be home in a few hours. You need to be in your room when he arrives. He can't know you're taking care of the girls. Why not? Because, the housekeeper hesitated, choosing her words carefully, he has a very specific way of dealing with the situation. He believes the girls need to learn discipline, routine, independence. If he finds out someone is spoiling them, he will object. Spoiling them? Grace couldn't hide her indignation. They are small children who lost their mother 6 months ago. They need affection, not discipline. I know. Mrs. Davies lowered her voice even more. But Mr. Blackwood, he's dealing with this in his own way. He works until he can't think anymore, avoids anything that reminds him. He believes he's protecting the girls by keeping his distance. But he's not. He's abandoning them. I know, Mrs. Davies repeated. And there was so much sadness in those 2 words that Grace understood the housekeeper saw everything, understood everything, but had no power to change anything. What I can do is give you cover. Take care of the girls at night when he's locked in his study, but be discreet. Around 10 at night, Grace quietly went up to the girls' room. William had arrived at 9, locked himself in his study as Mrs. Davies had predicted, and had shown no sign of coming. Out any time soon. The girls were awake, waiting. You came, Amelia said, relieved. I promised, didn't I? They settled into their beds. Grace pulled a chair to the center of the room where she could see all of them. Let's wait until midnight, when the stars are brightest. But in the meantime, how about you tell me about your mum, the good things you remember? There was a silence, the girls looking at each other again. Then Eleanor began. She used to sing. Every night before we went to sleep, she sang a different song for each of us. Because you are 4 different people, Charlotte continued, repeating what she had clearly heard many times. Even though you were born on the same day, each of you is special and unique. She made pancakes on Sundays, Amelia added, a sad smile on her lips. Shaped like smiley faces, one for each of us, just the way we liked. And at night, Olivia spoke, her voice still hesitant. She would come to say goodnight to each one. She started with me, because I was the youngest. Then Charlotte, then Eleanor, and last Amelia, always in that order. Grace listened to every word, every precious memory, seeing how the girls lit up when they spoke of their mother. These were not memories that brought only pain. They were memories that needed to be kept alive. When the clock struck midnight, she took the 4 of them to the window. The New York City sky was rarely completely starry, but that night a few stars managed to pierce the city's light pollution. See that one there? She pointed to the brightest one. That's your mum's. See how it shines brighter than all the others? The 4 girls pressed their little faces against the glass, looking. And you know what you're going to do now. You're going to talk to her. You can speak out loud or just in your thoughts. She'll hear you either way. You can tell her about your day. You can ask questions. You can simply say you miss her. There's no right or wrong way. They stood there for almost an hour, each girl in her own world, silently talking to the star that represented their mother. Grace watched, her heart both broken and mended at the same time, remembering the nights she had spent doing the same thing, talking to the stars that held Gabriel and Michael. When they finally went back to their beds, there was something different in the air. It wasn't happiness, it wasn't healing, but it was peace. A temporary, fragile, but real peace. Grace stayed there all night, as she had promised. When Eleanor woke up scared at 3 in the morning, she was there. When Amelia had a nightmare at 4, she was there. When Charlotte started trembling at 5, she was there. And when Olivia needed to go to the bathroom at 5:30, she went with her, holding her small, cold hand. At dawn, exhausted but satisfied, Grace went down to her room before William left for work. He would never know she had spent the night there, and for now, it was better that way. The routine was established over the next 2 weeks. During the day, Grace performed her duties as a maid under the watchful but increasingly lenient eye of Mrs. Davies. At night, after William locked himself in his study, she would discreetly go up to the girls' room. They never spoke about it openly, but Mrs. Davies began to leave a pillow and a blanket folded on a chair in the second-floor hallway, a silent gesture of approval. The girls began to change, subtly at first, almost imperceptible to anyone not paying close attention. But Grace paid attention. Olivia began to hold her stomach, less after meals. Charlotte started asking questions at breakfast, curious about the world again. Eleanor took longer to wake up from her first sleep, sometimes managing 2 full hours before the first nightmare. And Amelia, the most protective of the 4, began to relax a little, her shoulders less tense. Grace discovered that each girl had her own way of dealing with the absence. Amelia was the protector, always trying to take care of her sisters even when she herself was breaking inside. Charlotte was the observer, storing every detail of her mother in her memory as if they were treasures that might disappear if she didn't keep them alive. Eleanor was the emotional one, her feelings overflowing without a filter, crying when she needed to cry, screaming when she needed to scream. And Olivia was the silent one, processing everything internally, which made her more vulnerable to night terrors because she couldn't express what she felt. The star ritual became sacred. Every night at midnight, the 5 of them would gather at the window. Grace brought a large blanket from her room and spread it on the floor so they could sit comfortably while they looked at the sky. Each girl chose her own smaller star around their mother's main star, creating a small family constellation. One night, Charlotte asked something that the others clearly wanted to know as well. "Grace, did you lose someone too? Is that why you know about the stars?" Grace was silent for a moment, deciding how much to share. Finally, she looked at the 4, pairs of eyes fixed on her, and chose the truth. "Yes, I lost my 2 sons 5 years ago. They were 7 years old. They were twins, Gabriel and Michael." "How did they go away?" Amelia asked softly. "There was an accident, a truck with no brakes. It was very fast. They didn't suffer." Grace kept her voice steady, though she felt tears threatening. "After they left, I didn't know how to live anymore. I didn't know how to go on in a world where they weren't." "But you did go on," Eleanor observed. "I did. Because I discovered that love doesn't end just because someone goes away. The love remains, and we have to learn to live with it in a different way." She looked at each of them. "It's like the stars. They are always there, even when we can't see them. The love of the people we've lost is always with us, even when we can't touch them." "Where are your stars?" asked Olivia. Grace pointed to 2 stars close together, a little apart from their group. "Those ones there. Gabriel is the one on the left, always protecting Michael. And Michael is the one on the right, always making Gabriel laugh." The girls looked at the stars, then at Grace, then back at the stars. Charlotte was the first to speak. "Can we make your stars part of our star family, so they won't be alone?" Grace's heart squeezed so tight it hurt. "Of course you can." That night the family constellation grew. It was no longer just their mother's star and the 4 girls' stars. Now it included Gabriel and Michael, forming a small universe of love and loss, of memory and hope. During the day, Grace began to introduce small changes into the girls' routine. She discovered that Amelia loved to draw, so she brought paper and colored pencils she found in the house. Charlotte was fascinated by stories, so Grace would get books from the library and read to her in the afternoon. Eleanor needed movement to process her emotions, so Grace taught her little dances from when she had her own children. And Olivia responded to music, so Grace would sing softly while she worked, always aware of the little girl who would appear at the door to listen. Mrs. Davies watched everything with a mixture of approval and concern. One afternoon, she called Grace to the kitchen after the girls had gone up to their room. "You're getting too attached," she said bluntly, "and they to you. What will happen when Mr. Blackwood hires a new nanny?" Grace was cleaning the cabinets, her hands busy but her mind alert. "When that happens, I'll go back to being just the maid. But until then, I'll do what I can." "And if Mr. Blackwood finds out?" "Then he'll decide what to do. But Mrs. Davies," she looked directly at the housekeeper, "these girls are getting better. You can see it yourself. They're eating more, sleeping a little better, starting to take an interest in things again. How can I stop helping just because it might cause trouble?" Mrs. Davies sighed, but there was a small smile on her lips. "You're stubborn. You remind me of Beatrice. She was like that too, wouldn't take no for an answer when it came to the girls." "What was she like?" Grace asked. "The girls talk about her, but I'd like to understand better who the woman was who raised such special children." The housekeeper sat at the table, a rare gesture for someone always on the move. "Beatrice was pure light. When she found out she was pregnant with quadruplets, the doctors warned her about the risks, recommended selective reduction. She refused flatly, said she had received 4 blessings and wouldn't give up a single one." "And the pregnancy?" "Difficult. She was on bed rest for 4 months, but she never complained. She talked to each baby in her belly, sang to them, read them stories. When they were born, she had a notebook where she wrote down the unique characteristics of each one from the very first day. She said the world would try to treat them as a set, but she would make sure each one knew she was a complete individual." Grace smiled, imagining this woman she would never meet. "She sounds like she was incredible." She was. And when she got sick, Mrs. Davies paused, the pain still fresh in her voice. "She fought with everything she had, not for herself but for the girls. She wanted to see them grow up, wanted to be there for every important milestone, but there wasn't enough time." "And Mr. Blackwood? What was he like before?" "Completely different." Mrs. Davies glanced toward the study downstairs. "He was present, even playful. He'd come home from work, and the first thing he'd do was look for the girls. He'd carry all 4 at once, 2 in his arms, 2 on his back. He'd make funny voices at dinner to make them laugh. But after Beatrice left, it was as if a part of him had gone too. He doesn't know how to be that father anymore. Maybe he needs help finding his way back. Maybe. But he's proud. And he's convinced that the best way to protect the girls is by maintaining structure and distance. He thinks, getting too close will hurt them more. He's doing the opposite. I know, you know, but he can't see it yet." That night, something different happened. It was almost 1 in the morning when Amelia woke up, not from a nightmare, but with a question. "Grace, are you awake?" "I am, sweetie." Grace was sitting on the floor between the beds, as always. "What is it?" "I wanted to ask something." Amelia sat up in bed, hugging her pillow. "But I'm scared of the answer." "You can ask. I won't lie to you, but I'll be gentle with the truth. Does Daddy not love us anymore?" The question was like a punch to Grace's gut. "Oh, Amelia, he loves you so much." "Then why is he never here? Why doesn't he want to see us?" The other 3 girls were awake now, Grace realized. All listening, all wanting to know the answer to the same question. "Come here," she called softly. The 4 girls got out of their beds and settled around her on the floor. "Do you know how different people are sad in different ways?" Charlotte nodded. "When Eleanor is sad, she cries a lot. When I'm sad, I get very quiet." "Exactly. And adults are sad in different ways too. Some people, when they lose someone they love very much, get so sad that they can't be near the things that remind them of that person. It's not because they don't love them anymore. It's because they love them so much that it hurts too much." "Daddy can't be near us because we remind him of Mommy," Eleanor asked, processing. "I think it's something like that. You 4 are very much like your mother. Every time he looks at you, he must see her, and that must hurt a lot." "But we miss her too," Amelia said, tears starting to fall. "And we need him. It's not fair that he stays away because he's sad when we're sad too." "No, it's not fair," Grace agreed, pulling Amelia into a hug. "None of this is fair. It's not fair that you lost your mother so young. It's not fair that your father can't be present when you need him most. But you know what I've learned about things that aren't fair?" "What?" Olivia asked. "That even when we can't change what happened, we can choose how to respond. And you four," she hugged each one against her, "are choosing to be strong, to keep loving, to keep living. That is very brave." "But what if Daddy never comes back?" Charlotte verbalized the fear they all shared. "What if he keeps hiding forever? Then we'll have to help him find his way back, but not today, not tonight. Tonight you need to rest. Tomorrow we can think about how to help Daddy, okay?" The girls nodded, though it was clear the worry hadn't completely disappeared. Grace took them back to their beds, one by one, tucking them in, brushing hair from their faces, singing softly. When they had all finally fallen asleep, Grace stayed there in the dark, thinking. The girls were right. William was pulling away, building ever higher walls between himself and his daughters, and if someone didn't do something soon, those walls would become permanent. But what could she do? She was just the maid. She had no right to interfere in the life of a man who barely knew her, to question his choices as a father, and yet, seeing those four girls fighting alone against a double absence, of the mother who was gone and the father who had chosen to leave emotionally, how could she remain silent? Before dawn, as she was heading down to her room, Grace passed William's study. The light was still on. Through the crack under the door, she could see his shadow sitting at the desk, probably looking at documents that made no real difference, drowning himself in work that couldn't save him from the pain he was avoiding. She stopped there for a moment, her hand almost touching the door, almost knocking to say everything that needed to be said. But then she heard a sound, a low, muffled sob, quickly stifled. William was crying on the other side of that door, alone in his study, trying desperately not to make a sound, not to bother anyone with his pain. Grace pulled her hand away from the door and continued downstairs. He was broken too. He needed help too. The difference was that the girls were 5 years old and had no choice but to show their pain. William was 42 and had a whole arsenal of defenses to hide his. It was going to take more than good intentions to fix this family. It was going to take patience, strategy, and maybe a little audacity. And Grace, lying in her small room as the house finally fell silent, began to form a plan. Grace's plan started small. She knew that confronting William directly would be useless. Men like him, who built empires from nothing, didn't respond well to being challenged by a maid. She had to be subtle, create situations that would force him to see what he was ignoring. She started with food. During the 3rd week, Grace began to prepare the girls' breakfasts with more care. Nothing extravagant, but foods that made them smile. Pancakes shaped like stars, scrambled eggs seasoned just the way each one liked, fruit cut into fun shapes. Mrs. Davies frowned at first, but when she saw the girls actually eating, excited for the first time in months, she stopped complaining. One Saturday morning, Grace miscalculated the time. She was preparing breakfast when William came down earlier than usual. It was 7:30, and he normally didn't appear before 9 on weekends. Grace froze when he entered the kitchen, impeccable even on a Saturday, already dressed for another day at the office. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," Grace greeted, keeping her voice professional. He nodded distractedly, heading straight for the coffee maker. It was only when he turned around with his cup in hand that he really noticed the set table, with 4 plates decorated with smiley face pancakes, each one slightly different. "What is this?" he asked, pointing to the plates. "The girls' breakfast, sir." "Pancakes with faces? The girls like them this way. It makes them eat better." He studied her for a long moment, and Grace braced herself for a reprimand. But then they heard footsteps coming down the stairs. The 4 girls appeared, still in their pajamas, stopping abruptly when they saw their father in the kitchen. The silence was awkward. The girls looked at William with a mixture of surprise and caution, as if they didn't know whether to approach or retreat. William looked back, clearly as uncomfortable as they were. "Good morning, girls," he finally said, his voice too formal for a father speaking to his young daughters. "Good morning, Daddy," they replied in unison, a rehearsed response that sounded mechanical. William placed his cup on the counter. I'm going to work, have a good breakfast. And he left without looking back. The girls watched him go, their shoulders slumping in disappointment. Grace clenched her fists, frustration boiling inside her, but she kept her face neutral. Come on, girls. Your smiley stars are waiting. But the joy had been sucked out of the room. The girls ate in silence, the pancakes having lost their charm. Amelia pushed the food from one side of her plate to the other. Charlotte kept her eyes down. Eleanor had tears silently streaming down her face. Olivia simply stopped eating after 2 bites. Grace watched, heartbroken. One moment. That's all William needed. One moment to sit with them, to ask how they were, to simply be present. But he couldn't even manage that. After breakfast, as the girls went back up to their room, Grace decided to do something that would probably cost her her job. She knocked on the study door. Come in. She opened the door and stood in the entrance. William was sitting at his desk, staring at the computer screen, but Grace noticed the screen was blank. He wasn't really working. He was just hiding. Mr. Blackwood, may I have a minute? He finally looked at her, impatient. Is it about work? It's about the girls. His face immediately shut down. Then it's none of your business. You're the maid, not the nanny. I know my position, sir, but I see these children every day, and they need you. They have everything they need, a house, food, clothes, education. But they don't have you. His eyes narrowed. How dare you? I dare because someone needs to speak up. Grace took 2 more steps into the study, leaving the door ajar. These girls wake up every night with nightmares. They barely eat. They're losing weight. And more than anything, they're losing hope that their father is still here. I am here. I work 16 hours a day to secure their future. But they don't need a distant future, sir. They need now. They need a father who has breakfast with them, who listens to their dreams, who simply hugs them once in a while. William stood up from his chair, his hands resting on the desk. You know nothing about me or my family. You don't know what we've lost. You don't know what I'm trying to do. You're right. Grace kept her voice calm despite her racing heart. I don't know exactly what you're going through, but I know what your daughters are going through. And I know they are drowning while you hide. Get out of my office. With pleasure, sir. But before I go, let me say one thing. Grace looked directly at him. Your daughters are afraid you don't love them anymore. That every time you look at them, you see the wife you lost, and it hurts so much you'd rather not look. They are 5 years old, and they are carrying that worry alone. So yes, maybe it's none of my business. But someone had to say it. She left before he could answer, closing, the door softly behind her. Her hands were shaking. She had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. He would probably fire her. And then what would happen to the girls? Mrs. Davies found her in the hallway, her eyes wide. I heard everything. Have you gone mad? He's going to fire you. Probably, but it needed to be said. And what will the girls do without you? Grace stopped, that question hitting her with full force. She had thought about confronting William, but she hadn't fully considered the consequences. The girls were finally getting better. They were finally sleeping a little better, eating a little more, smiling occasionally. If she left now, she would be one more important person abandoning them. I don't know, Mrs. Davies. I don't know. The rest of the day passed in tension. Grace performed her duties mechanically, expecting to be called in and dismissed at any moment. The girls sensed something was wrong, becoming quieter than usual, watching her with concern. That night, when she went up for the star ritual, they bombarded her with questions. Are you leaving? Amelia asked directly, like all the other nannies. I'm not your nanny, Grace reminded her gently. I'm the maid. But you take care of us, Charlotte said, better than any nanny we've had. And if I told you that maybe I have to leave, would you be okay? No, Eleanor cried, tears immediate. You can't leave. You promised. Olivia simply threw herself into Grace's arms, clinging tightly. Hey, calm down. Grace hugged all 4 of them. I don't want to leave. But sometimes adults do things that children don't understand. Your father might decide it's better if I don't stay here. Why would he do that? Charlotte asked, ever the logical one. Because I said things he didn't want to hear. Things about him needing to spend more time with you. The girls looked at each other, that silent communication happening again. You talked to Daddy about us? Amelia asked, hopeful. You tried to make him see us? I tried, but I don't know if it worked. No one's ever done that before, Eleanor said, impressed. All the nannies were afraid of him. I'm afraid of him too, Grace admitted. But I'm more afraid of what might happen to you if someone doesn't do something. That night, the star ritual had a different purpose. The girls didn't just talk to their mother's star. They created a new star, a star for the father who was still alive but seemed lost. Grace looked at those 4 girls, so small yet already so wise, trying to find ways to reach a father who couldn't reach back. And she made a silent promise. She wouldn't leave without a fight. She wouldn't abandon them as so many others had. At 3 a.m, Grace was on the floor of the girls' room when she heard footsteps in the hallway. She froze. The footsteps stopped at the bedroom door. She turned her head slowly and found William standing there, looking in. The hallway light silhouetted him. He was in a robe, his hair disheveled, deep, dark circles marking his face. He said nothing, just stood there, watching Grace sitting on the floor between his daughters' beds, a thin blanket over her shoulders, clearly spending another night awake. Their eyes met. Grace didn't look away, didn't try to explain. She just waited. William looked at each of his daughters, sleeping more peacefully than he had probably seen them in months. His expression was indecipherable in the dark. Finally, he spoke, his voice low so as not to wake the girls. Tomorrow morning in my study, 8 o'clock. Yes, sir. He left, his footsteps receding down the hall. Grace let out the breath she'd been holding. So this was it. He would fire her in the morning. She had all night to prepare, to decide what she would say to the girls. But when Amelia stirred, murmuring in her sleep, and Grace instinctively reached out to soothe the girl, she knew she had no regrets. Even if she lost her job, even if she had to go back to Elmira. Without a penny, she didn't regret giving those 4 girls a few weeks of peace. Dawn came too quickly. Grace went down to her room at 6, took a quick shower, and put on her best work clothes. At 8 o'clock sharp, she knocked on the study door. Come in and close the door. She obeyed, standing before the desk while William remained seated, his fingers interlaced, his expression serious. Sit down. Grace sat in the chair opposite the desk, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. I'll be direct, William began. You overstepped your bounds yesterday. You questioned my parenting. You interfered in matters that are not your responsibility. Yes, sir, I did. Ordinarily, that would be grounds for immediate dismissal. I understand, sir. But, he paused, looking at her with those tired eyes. Last night, I went to check on some documents and passed by the girls' room. I saw you there, at 3 a.m. It wasn't the first time, was it? Grace hesitated, then opted for the truth. No, sir, it wasn't. How many nights? Every night since I arrived, sir. Almost a month. William leaned back in his chair, processing this information. Why? Because they needed someone, and there was no one else. You weren't hired to be a nanny. You were hired to clean and cook. I know, sir. But when a child cries, you don't respond because it's your job. You respond because it's the right thing to do. William was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, lower, more vulnerable. You said they think I don't love them anymore. They are children, sir. They don't understand why you're absent. They only know that you are. He ran his hands over his face, and for the first time, Grace saw beyond the successful businessman. She saw a broken man desperately trying to hold the pieces together. I don't know how to be near them without falling apart, he finally admitted. Every time I look at them, I see Beatrice. I see everything we've lost, and I can't be the father they need when I can barely breathe through the pain. You are not alone in that pain, Grace said gently. They feel it too. And maybe, together, you can all learn to carry the weight. William didn't fire her. Instead, he did, something that surprised them both. He asked her to help him reconnect with his daughters. The conversation in the study lasted 2 hours, with Grace explaining the girls' nightly routine, the rituals she had created, the small victories, and the great challenges they still faced. However, change doesn't happen overnight, especially in hearts so wounded. William started slowly, frighteningly slowly, in Grace's eyes. He began having breakfast with the girls on Saturdays, only on Saturdays and only for 30 minutes before locking himself back in his study. The first attempts were painfully awkward. The girls didn't know how to act around their father, and he didn't know how to talk to them. Grace stayed in the kitchen making more pancakes than necessary, just to have an excuse to be nearby in case they needed her. On the first Saturday, the silence was broken only by polite requests to pass the juice or the sugar. On the second Saturday, Amelia mustered the courage to ask about her father's work, and William spent 15 minutes explaining civil engineering in such technical terms that the 4 girls just nodded politely without understanding a word. On the third Saturday, Charlotte asked the question they all wanted to ask. "Daddy, do you miss Mommy?" William froze with his fork in midair. The silence stretched for so long that Grace, from the kitchen, thought about intervening. But then she saw something change in his face. The defenses cracked, and for a moment, just a moment, the businessman disappeared and the father appeared. "Every day," he finally answered, his voice hoarse. "Every minute of every day." "We do too," Eleanor said, tears already welling up. "Grace taught us how to talk to her through the stars. Do you want to learn?" William looked at Grace in the kitchen, surprise and something more complex in his expression. She gave a slight encouraging nod. He turned his attention back to his daughters. "I would like that very much." That night, for the first time in 6 months, William went up to the girls' room. It wasn't easy. Grace could see the tension in every line of his body, the conscious effort he was making not to retreat. The girls were nervous too, clustered near Grace as if she were their safe harbor. "So, how does this star thing work?" William asked, his hands in his pockets, clearly uncomfortable. Amelia, always the bravest, approached. "First, we have to find Mommy's star. It's that one, the brightest one." William looked where she was pointing. Grace watched his face, seeing the pain cross his features. He remained there, still, looking at that star, and for a moment Grace thought he would flee. But then Olivia, the quietest, did something surprising. She took her father's hand. William looked down at the small hand holding his, and something in him broke. He knelt, bringing himself to the girls' level, and Olivia threw herself into his arms. Then Eleanor, then Charlotte, then Amelia. The 4 of them hugged him, and he hugged them back, holding on as if he were afraid they would disappear. Grace turned away discreetly, wiping her own tears. Maybe there was hope, after all. The following days brought subtle but significant changes. William started coming home earlier, at 8 instead of midnight. He had dinner with the girls, though he often listened more than he spoke. He learned that Amelia loved to draw, that Charlotte read a different book every week, that Eleanor couldn't sit still for more than 5 minutes, and that Olivia expressed herself best through music. One evening, Grace was in the girls' room when William appeared earlier than expected. It was only 9 o'clock, and she was in the middle of a story about 2 stars who got lost and found each other. "Sorry to interrupt," he said from the door. "May I come in?" The girls nodded enthusiastically, making room for him to sit on the floor with them. William looked at Grace, a silent request in his eyes. She continued the story, and he stayed there, listening, watching how his daughters hung on her every word. When the story ended and the girls were getting ready for sleep, Amelia made an unexpected request. "Daddy, can you stay until we fall asleep?" William looked at Grace, uncertain. She nodded encouragingly. "Of course," he said, and Grace saw how much that simple word cost him. "I'll leave you," Grace said, getting up, but Olivia held her by the hand. "Can you stay too?" William and Grace looked at each other. It was a delicate moment, a fragile balance. Grace was about to refuse when William spoke. "Please, stay." So they stayed, the 2 adults and the 4 children, sitting together in that room as the night wore on. The girls told them about their day, about the drawings they made, the books they read, the games they invented. William listened, really listened, asking questions, laughing at their stories. When the girls finally fell asleep, William and Grace remained there for a few more minutes in silence. Then he spoke, his voice low. "Thank you for not giving up on them, for not giving up on me." "They deserve to have their father back," Grace replied. "And you deserve to have your daughters." He looked at her with an intensity that made Grace look away. "You lost children too. How can you do this? How can you be here taking care of my daughters without it destroying you?" "It destroys me a little every day," she admitted. "Every time I hug one of them, I remember mine. Every time I sing, I hear my boys' voices asking for one more song. But you know what I've discovered? The pain doesn't get smaller, but our hearts learn to carry more. They learn to have space for loss and for love at the same time. You're stronger than I am." "I'm not. I've just had more time to learn. And I had no choice. When I lost Gabriel and Michael, I lost my husband too. He couldn't handle the loss, my grief on top of his. He left. I was completely alone." She looked at the sleeping girls. "You are not alone. You have 4 reasons to keep going, 4 little reasons that need you." William was silent for a long time. "Beatrice made videos," he said finally. "Before she left, she recorded messages for the girls, for important milestones in their lives. Birthdays, graduations, weddings. But I've never been able to show them. I've never been able to watch them. Maybe it's time. Maybe. But I'm afraid. Afraid of falling apart in front of them. Afraid that seeing Beatrice alive on screen will make it all too real." "It's already real, William. The pain is already here. Hiding the videos doesn't change that. But sharing them with your daughters, that might turn the pain into something you carry together." The following weeks brought them closer. William began waking up earlier to have breakfast with the girls during the week as well. He took them for a walk in the park, the first family outing since Beatrice had passed. It was difficult, punctuated by moments of uncomfortable silence and unexpected tears, but they made it through. Grace watched it all with a mixture of joy and something more complicated. She was happy to see the family reconnecting, but she felt increasingly out of place. What was her role now? She still went up to the girls' room every night, but William was now often there too. She still prepared the special breakfasts, but William was starting to help, wanting to learn how to make the smiley face pancakes. One evening, Mrs. Davies called her to the kitchen. "You've noticed, haven't you?" "Noticed what?" "That they don't need you as much anymore. They're getting better. Mr. Blackwood is present. The family is healing." Grace nodded, an unexpected sadness tightening her chest. "It's what I wanted. It's what was right. But now you're lost." Mrs. Davies sat beside her. "You made a home here even if it was temporary, and now that home is changing again. I'm just the maid. You and I both know you're more than that. To these girls, you're family. And to Mr. Blackwood," Mrs. Davies paused, choosing her words carefully, "he looks at you differently now." "Mrs. Davies, please." Grace felt a blush creep up her face. "He's still grieving, and I'm just a woman who brought light back into this dark house. Just someone who reminded him of what's important. Mrs. Davies placed a hand on Grace's. "Don't diminish yourself. You've done something extraordinary here." But Grace couldn't fully accept that. Yes, things were improving. But there was still so much to do. The girls' nightmares had lessened, but not disappeared. William was more present, but he still struggled to express his emotions. The family was healing, but the wounds were deep. That night, something happened that would change everything. It was almost midnight when Grace heard a scream from the girls' room. It wasn't a nightmare scream. It was different. It was pure terror. She ran down the hall and found a scene that made her freeze. Olivia was on the floor convulsing, foam coming from her mouth. The other 3 girls were screaming, terrified, and William was kneeling beside Olivia, trying to turn her on her side, panic etched on his face. "Call an ambulance," he yelled when he saw Grace. "Now!" Grace ran to get the phone, her hands shaking as she dialed. As she spoke with the operator, she watched William with Olivia, seeing him do everything he could to help her. The convulsions finally stopped, but the girl was unconscious. The ambulance arrived in 15 minutes that felt like 15 hours. The paramedics took Olivia, with William following behind. Before leaving, he looked at Grace. "Take care of them, please." The 3 remaining girls were hysterical. Grace gathered them, hugging all 3 at once, trying to keep them calm while she herself was terrified. It was an endless night of tears, unanswered questions, and fears that no star could soothe. William called at 5 in the morning. Olivia was stable. The doctors believed it had been a febrile seizure, likely caused by an infection she had been hiding for days. Nothing serious, but frightening. When William returned home at noon, carrying Olivia in his arms, her 3 sisters ran to them. Grace stayed back watching the family reunion and realized something important. William had handled the crisis. He hadn't run away, hadn't hidden at work. He had stayed with his daughter, held her hand at the hospital, faced his fears. He was finding his way back to them. And, maybe, just maybe, it was time for Grace to take a step back and let them find their new balance as a family. The crisis with Olivia changed something fundamental in the house's dynamic. William didn't revert to his pattern of working until dawn. He cancelled important meetings to stay home for the next few days, wanting to make sure Olivia was truly well, and for the first time, the girls saw him vulnerable, saw that he had fears too, that he needed them as much as they needed him. Grace began to withdraw gradually, not abruptly but with small, calculated steps. She still went up to the girls' room at night, but now William was already there most of the time, reading stories or simply sitting between their beds. She would stand at the door, watching, ready to intervene if necessary, but becoming less and less needed. The girls noticed the change. One afternoon, 3 weeks after the incident with Olivia, Amelia found her in the laundry room. "Are you avoiding us?" Grace stopped folding the sheets and knelt to the girl's level. "Of course not, sweetie. Why would you think that? You don't stay with us as long. Anymore, you don't tell as many stories, you don't stay in our room all night." Grace chose her words carefully. "That's because you don't need me as much anymore. Your father is here now. He can take care of you." "But we want you to stay too," Amelia said, tears starting to form. "You're important to us. And you're important to me." Grace hugged the girl. "But I need to let your father learn how to be your father again. If I'm always around, he might not get the chance to really connect with you. But why can't we have both? Why does it have to be you or him?" It was a fair question, one Grace had no simple answer for. The truth was more complicated. The truth was that she was getting too attached, that she was starting to see these girls as her own, that she looked at William and saw not just an employer, but something more confusing and dangerous. She needed to create distance before she got hurt, before she forgot her place. "You can have both," she said finally, "but in different ways. I'll always be here if you need me. But your father needs to be your priority now." Amelia didn't seem satisfied with the answer, but she accepted it. In the following days, Grace noticed the 4 girls watching her more closely, as if trying to understand what was happening. And William noticed the change too. He sought her out one evening after the girls were asleep. Grace was in the kitchen making her nightly tea when he appeared. "You're pulling away from them." It wasn't a question. Grace kept her hands busy with the cup. "I'm giving you space to build a relationship with your daughters. You can do both. You can be present and still give me space." Grace finally looked at him. "No, sir, I can't. Because the more time I spend with them, the more attached I get. And they are not my daughters. They never will be. They're yours." William was silent, studying her. "You're afraid." "I am," she admitted. "Afraid of forgetting my own children. Afraid of trying to replace them. Afraid of forming bonds I shouldn't form." "With the girls or with me?" The question caught her off guard. "Both," she answered honestly, because she saw no point in lying. William moved closer, leaning against the counter beside her. "It will be 6 months since Beatrice passed next week. 6 months I've been trying to survive without her. And you know what I've realized? I'm not just surviving anymore. For the first time since she's been gone, I'm actually living. And that's largely because of you. Mr. Blackwood, William, just William. And let me finish." He turned to face her. "You came into this house as a maid, but you became so much more. To the girls, You're a savior. And to me, he hesitated, struggling with the words, to me you're a reminder that there's still light in the world, that there's still kindness, compassion, love. Grace felt tears threatening. I can't be that for you. I shouldn't be. Why not? Because you still love your wife. Because I'm just the maid. Because this is too complicated. Loving Beatrice and feeling something for you are not mutually exclusive, and you were never just the maid. Not after the first night you spent in my daughter's room. Not after you stood up to me to defend them. Not after you brought life back into this house. Grace shook her head, taking a step back. This isn't right. The girls have just gotten their father back. We can't complicate things. The girls asked me the other day if I like you, William said, and Grace froze. You know what I said? I said yes. And you know what they said? That they like you too. That they want you to stay, not as a maid, as family. The tears finally fell. William, I can't. I can't just step into your lives like this. Beatrice was their mother. I'm not a replacement for anyone. No one is asking you to replace anyone. He moved closer again, and this time Grace didn't retreat. We're asking you to stay, to be a part of this, whatever this means. What if I mess it up? What if my presence prevents you from healing as a family? And what if your absence hurts us more? Grace had no answer to that. They stood there in silence, the space between them charged with unspoken things. Finally, William spoke again, more quietly. You don't have to decide anything now, but please don't pull away. Not from the girls, not from me. Just stay. We'll figure out the rest together. Before she could answer, they heard a scream from the second floor. They both ran up the stairs to find Eleanor in the hallway, her eyes wide with terror. There's someone in the room, she cried. A shadow! William went into the room first, turning on all the lights. There was no one there, just Charlotte, Amelia, and Olivia, awake and frightened. Eleanor had had a particularly vivid nightmare, and, disoriented, thought she was still inside it. Grace picked her up, calming her down while William checked the entire room, showing the girls that everything was safe. When Eleanor finally calmed down, still clinging, to Grace, William suggested something new. How about we all sleep in here tonight? He looked around the room. We can bring in some mattresses, make it like a camp-out. The girls loved the idea. Within half an hour, they had turned the room into a makeshift camp, with mattresses on the floor, blankets forming tents, and even a campfire made with a flashlight and red crepe paper that Charlotte found in the craft closet. Grace tried to leave, but the girls wouldn't let her. Amelia pulled out an extra mattress. For you, she said simply, as if there were no room for discussion. So they stayed, the six of them, settled in that transformed room. William told stories about when he met Beatrice, funny stories that made the girls laugh, beautiful stories that made them sigh. For the first time, he spoke of his wife not with paralyzing pain, but with nostalgic love, a celebration of her life rather than just mourning her loss. Grace watched, seeing how the girls drank in every word, eager to know more about their mother through their father's memories, seeing how William could finally share these memories without falling apart. Something was healing. There, slowly, painfully but truly. When the girls finally slept, snuggled on their mattresses, William and Grace remained awake. He was on the other side of the room, but their eyes met in the dim light. Thank you, he mouthed silently. She nodded, a small smile. She had no more words, no more arguments. In that moment, in that room full of sleeping children and living memories, she simply accepted being there. She accepted being a part of it, even without fully understanding what it meant. In the morning, they woke to the girls already playing among the mattresses, building forts and making up stories. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the room in a way Grace hadn't seen before, or maybe she was just seeing it differently now. Mrs. Davies found them all still in the room at 8 in the morning, a scene that made her stop at the door. Mr. Blackwood, Grace, and the 4 girls, all still in pajamas, laughing at something Charlotte had said. The housekeeper had to wipe away her own tears before anyone noticed. In the following days, they established a new rhythm. William remained present, but now without the tension of before. Grace remained involved, but without the weight of total responsibility. The girls flourished in this new dynamic, having two adults who cared, who worked together instead of competing or replacing. But there was still a pending conversation, a decision to be made. And that decision would come soon in a way none of them expected. 3 days after the impromptu campout, Grace received a call. It was from Elmira, from the only friend she still kept in touch with. There was a job opportunity there at the local school, a position as a library assistant that would pay almost double what she earned as a maid. It was a chance to start over, to go back home, to perhaps finally find peace in the places where Gabriel and Michael had lived. Her friend needed an answer in a week. Grace put the phone away, her heart heavy. It was exactly the kind of opportunity that should have made her happy. It was the honorable exit, the chance to leave before things got more complicated. But when she looked out the window and saw William in the garden with the 4 girls, all laughing as they tried to fly a kite, her heart ached. This had become her home in a way she hadn't expected. These people had become her family in a way she hadn't planned. And now she had to choose safety and distance, or risk and closeness. The old life she knew, or the new life that was just beginning to form. She had 1 week to decide, 1 week that would change everything. Grace didn't tell anyone about the job offer. She kept the secret like a stone in her pocket, heavy and constant, reminding her of a decision she needed to make but kept postponing. Each day that passed made the choice harder, because each day brought new moments that tied her to this family. Like on Tuesday, when Olivia finally sang for the first time since her mother passed. Grace was preparing lunch when she heard a small, sweet voice coming from the living room. Olivia was sitting at the piano that no one had touched for months, her little fingers clumsily pressing the keys, singing a song that Beatrice used to sing. Grace stood frozen at the kitchen door, tears streaming silently, as she watched that little soul find her voice again. Or, on Thursday, when Amelia brought her a drawing she had made, it was their family, but not just the 4 girls and their father. There were 6 people in the drawing, William in the center, the 4 girls around him, and to the side, slightly separate but clearly part of the group, was Grace. And floating above them all like a guardian angel was a female figure that could only be Beatrice. Grace looked at that drawing for a long time, her heart aching. "All of us," Amelia had said simply, as if it were obvious, as if Grace had always belonged there. On Friday, 3 days before she had to give her answer about Elmira, William organized something special. He called Grace to his study in the afternoon, when the girls were in their art class with a private teacher who had started coming twice a week. "Please sit down," he said, and there was something different in his posture, a nervousness Grace had never seen. She sat, her hands folded in her lap, waiting. William pulled a small velvet box from a drawer. For a terrible moment, Grace thought it was a ring, and her heart pounded in panic. But when he opened it, it revealed a delicate necklace with a star-shaped pendant. "The girls chose it," he explained. "They said you need a star too, one you can always carry with you." He extended the box to her. "They wanted something to show that you're part of their constellation." Grace took the necklace with trembling hands. The star was simple but beautiful, and when she looked closer, she saw it had tiny engravings. She turned the pendant over and read the names: Amelia, Eleanor, Charlotte, Olivia, and on the back, "And to Grace, our guardian star." "I can't accept this," she said, though her hands couldn't let go of the necklace. "It's too much." "It's exactly enough," William corrected. "Grace, I know you've been pulling away. I know you're trying to create distance, and I need to know why. Is it because of me? Something I did?" "No, it's not you. It's complicated." "Then uncomplicate it. Talk to me." Grace looked at him, at this man who months ago was just a distant employer and who was now, what exactly? A friend, something more. She didn't even know anymore. "I received a job offer," she said finally. "In Elmira. It pays well, it's a respectable position. It would be a fresh start." William's expression changed, something between pain and understanding crossing his features. "And you want to go?" "I should want to. It's the sensible choice, but I can't imagine not being here. Not seeing the girls every day, not seeing you. Grace stopped, realizing what she had said. I've gotten too attached. Exactly what I said I couldn't do. William stood up, walked around the desk and knelt beside her chair, bringing himself to her eye level. Grace, look at me. She obeyed, meeting those dark eyes that once avoided any emotional contact and now truly saw her. You haven't gotten too attached. You've allowed yourself to love again. There's a difference, and yes, it's scary. I know because I'm scared too. He took her hand, a bold gesture that made her heart race. I don't want you to stay out of obligation or pity, but if there's any part of you that wants to stay because this has become your home, because these girls are your family, because He paused, taking a deep breath. Because you feel what I feel when you look at me, then please don't go. And what do you feel when you look at me? Grace asked, her voice barely a whisper. Hope. For the first time since Beatrice left, I feel hope. I see a future that isn't just survival. I see the possibility of being happy again, of loving again without it meaning I'm betraying her memory. Grace felt the tears fall. William, I'm so scared. Scared I'm replacing my sons with your daughters. Scared I'm taking advantage of your vulnerability. Scared that this is all just a result of shared trauma and not something real. What if it's real despite the trauma? What if it's real because of it? He squeezed her hand. Our losses have shaped us, Grace. They've made us the people we are today. And maybe that's exactly why we understand each other so well. Before she could answer, they heard excited voices from the hall. The girls were back from art class, and by the sound of it, they were looking for them. Daddy! Grace! Where are you? William stood up quickly, and Grace put the necklace back in its box with trembling hands. When the four girls burst into the study, they found the two adults trying to look normal, though the tension in the air was palpable. Look what we made! Charlotte showed off 4 small canvases, each painted by one of the sisters. They were childish interpretations of the night sky, with stars of different sizes and colors. They're beautiful, Grace said, genuinely impressed. Each one has its own style. The teacher said we're going to have an exhibition, Eleanor announced, jumping with excitement. And you both have to come. Of course we'll go, William promised, looking at Grace with a meaning only the two of them understood. Is Grace staying over? Amelia asked hopefully. It's been a while since we all did the star ritual together. William looked at Grace, a silent question in his eyes. She nodded, and the smile he gave her made something inside her melt. That night, the 6 of them gathered in the girls' room for the ritual, but this time it was different. William took the lead, telling a story about Beatrice that the girls had never heard. About the day they found out they were having quadruplets, about the simultaneous fear and joy, about how Beatrice had insisted on naming each of them before they were even born, so that each baby would know she was special from the very first moment. The girls listened, fascinated, and Grace saw how these stories nourished them, giving substance to memories that were beginning to fade. She also saw how William could finally celebrate Beatrice's life instead of just mourning her absence. When the girls fell asleep, Grace sat in the hallway with William, neither of them wanting to break the moment. You still haven't given me an answer, he said finally. About Elmira. I know. I have until Monday. And what is your heart telling you? That I'm crazy for considering staying, that it violates every rule of professional distance, that I'm putting my heart at risk again. And what else is it saying? Grace turned to him, allowing herself to really look, to really see. That maybe it's time to stop being so afraid of living, that maybe God didn't bring me here by accident, that maybe, she swallowed, gathering courage, that maybe you and your girls are my second chance at a family. William took her hand again, and this time she didn't pull away. Then stay, not as an employee. Stay as whatever you want to be. The girl's official guardian, a family friend, something more when you're ready. But please stay. And Beatrice, Grace had to ask, your love for her? We'll always be here. William touched his own chest. She is the mother of my daughters. She was my first love. Nothing and no one can erase that. but she also wouldn't have wanted me to spend the rest of my life alone, for the girls to grow up without additional love in their lives. Beatrice was too generous for that. How can you be so sure? Because she told me. William smiled sadly. In her last days, when she knew she was leaving, she made me promise not to close my heart, that I would find joy again. At the time, I couldn't really hear her, but now I understand what she was asking. She was giving me permission to move on when I was ready. And are you ready? Not completely. I'll still have bad days. I'll still miss her. I'll still cry. But for the first time, I can imagine a future that isn't just pain and longing. And a lot of that is thanks to you. Grace felt the weight of the decision shifting, the scales tipping. But there were still doubts, still fears. Can I have the weekend? To really think, without pressure? Of course. William stood, helping her up as well. But Grace, while you're thinking, remember one thing. He pointed to the room where the 4 girls slept peacefully. Those 4 girls love you. And He hesitated, then continued with a firm voice. I do too. Before she could respond, he turned and went downstairs, leaving her alone with those words echoing in her mind. Grace stood there for a long time, looking at the stars through the hallway window. 2 in particular, her stars, Gabriel and Michael. She spoke to them silently, as she did every night. She asked them what they thought, if it would be okay for her to love other children, to love another man. She asked if they would understand, and in the quiet of the night she felt peace. Not a clear answer, not a voice from the heavens, but a gentle peace that said it was possible to honor the past while building a future. That love was not finite, that the human heart had an infinite capacity to love again, without diminishing the love that came before. She touched the necklace she now wore. The star hung against her chest, a comforting weight. Her guardian star, the girls had said. But maybe it was they who were guarding her, saving her, reminding her that there were still reasons to live, to love, to choose joy despite the pain. She had a weekend to decide, but deep down, in the most profound place in her heart, Grace already knew what her answer would be. Saturday dawned with a sky unusually clear for New York City. Grace woke up early as always, but this time not to do chores. She dressed and went down to the kitchen, where she found Mrs. Davies already making coffee. You've decided, the housekeeper said. It wasn't a question. She knew Grace well enough to read her face. Not officially yet, but I think so. And what's the decision? Before Grace could answer, William entered the kitchen. He was also up early, his hair still damp from a shower, wearing jeans and a casual shirt Grace had never seen him wear. He looked younger this way, less the then-peccable businessman, and more just a dad on his day off. Good morning, he greeted, and there was a nervousness in his voice. I was thinking, if you don't have plans, maybe we could spend the day out, all of us. The girls had been asking to go to the park, and I thought it might be nice. Mrs. Davies coughed discreetly. I'll go wake the girls then. When they were alone, William approached. I'm not trying to influence your decision. I just wanted you to see what it could be like, if you stay. Grace smiled despite the tension. Their day at the park isn't exactly real daily life. No, but it's a start. The girls were ecstatic about the outing. It was the first time since Beatrice passed that they would do something like this as a family. Grace tried to stay in the background, just observing, but the girls wouldn't allow it. Amelia took her right hand, Olivia her left, while Charlotte and Eleanor went ahead with their father. Central Park was bustling on that sunny Saturday. Families with children, couples in love, elderly people feeding ducks at the pond. It was a picture of normalcy that the Blackwood family hadn't experienced in a long time. William bought popcorn for the girls, and they ran to feed the ducks. Grace stood with him at the edge of the pond, watching the 4 girls laugh, gently bickering over who would throw the next handful of popcorn, just being normal children for the first time in so long. They're so different, William observed, admiration in his voice. 3 months ago, they couldn't get out of bed without having a panic attack. Look at them now. Children are resilient, they just needed time and love. And you. They needed you. Grace didn't reply, but she felt the warmth of his words. She watched Amelia helping Olivia throw the popcorn, Charlotte telling elaborate stories about the lives of the ducks, Eleanor chasing pigeons with innocent joy. They were whole children now, no longer fragmented by loss. After the ducks, they went to the playground. William pushed the girls on the swings one at a time, giving individual attention to each. Grace watched, seeing how he had learned each daughter's preferences. Amelia liked to swing high and fast. Eleanor wanted him to catch her in the air. Charlotte preferred a moderate height and conversation while swinging. Olivia just wanted him to stay close, holding the swing's chain even when she was in the air. An older man sat on the bench next to Grace. "What a beautiful family," he commented, watching William with the girls. "How many children do you have?" Grace opened her mouth to correct him, to explain that it wasn't quite like that, but the words wouldn't come. Because looking at that scene, what else did it look like but a family? "4," she finally said. "4 girls. All identical. What a blessing." The man smiled. "And he's a devoted father. My wife always says you can measure a man by how he treats his children." "He is a good father," Grace agreed, and she realized it was true. William had transformed from a man running from his own pain to a present, engaged, loving father. He wasn't perfect. He still had difficult moments, but he was trying. He was really trying. The man left, and soon William returned with the girls, all sweaty and happy. "Can we have ice cream?" Charlotte asked, using her best puppy dog eyes. William looked at Grace with a conspiratorial expression. "What do you think? Is ice cream before lunch allowed?" It was a simple question, but it carried so much weight. He was asking for her opinion, treating her as a partner in raising the girls, not as an employee. Grace felt something shift inside her. "I think special days deserve special rules," she said, and the girls cheered. They sat under the shade of a large tree, the girls with their ice creams, William and Grace with coconut water. It was such a normal, simple scene that Grace almost forgot the complexities that had brought them there. "Grace," Amelia began, licking her strawberry ice cream, "if you don't leave, can you be like our second mum?" The silence that followed was heavy. William opened his mouth to intervene, but Grace stopped him with a gentle gesture. "Amelia, you know that no one can replace your mother, right? She will always be your mother no matter what happens." "I know," the girl said seriously, "but my art teacher said families can be many types. Some of her friends have 2 moms, some have 2 dads, some have grandparents who are like parents, so I thought maybe we could have you too, not in Mommy's place, but in addition to her." "Like a bonus mom," Olivia added, her voice still shy but clear. Grace looked at William, seeking help, but saw that he was as emotional as she was. Finally, she chose honesty. "I would love to be a special part of your lives, but these are big decisions that adults need to think about carefully, and no matter what happens, you will always be special to me." "Does that mean you're going to stay?" Eleanor asked, hopeful. "It means I'm thinking about it very hard." The girls seemed to accept this answer, turning their attention back to their ice creams. But Grace felt William's gaze on her, full of expectation and something deeper. The rest of the day passed in a pleasant haze. They had lunch at a simple restaurant near the park, the girls chattering about everything and nothing. They walked through the park until the girls' legs grew tired. William carried Olivia on his back, Amelia held his hand, and Eleanor and Charlotte walked beside Grace. When they returned home late in the afternoon, the girls were exhausted but radiant. Grace had never seen them so fully happy. They took baths and went to bed early without much persuasion. After they fell asleep, Grace went to the garden needing fresh air, space to think. She found William already there, sitting on the bench under the apple tree, watching the stars begin to appear. "May I join you?" He patted the space beside him. "Always." They sat in silence for a while, just existing in the same space, listening to the sounds of the night. Finally, William spoke. "Beatrice used to sit here with me. After the girls were born and the house went crazy, this was our refuge, our place to remember who we were besides parents." He looked at Grace. "I avoided this garden for months, but today, after such a good day, I felt drawn here, and it didn't hurt as much as I expected. That's a good sign." "It is. A lot of things are hurting less lately. He turned to her. Grace, I know I asked for the weekend, but I need to be honest about something. She waited, her heart racing. If you leave, we'll be okay. I'll be okay. The girls will be okay. You taught us how to heal, how to be a family again. We'll carry on with those lessons even if you're not here, so please don't stay out of pity or obligation. That's not why I'm considering staying. Then why are you? Grace thought of all the reasons. The girls, the house that had become a home, the job that was more than a job. But most of all, she thought of the man beside her, broken and remade, vulnerable and strong, someone who understood loss in a way few could. Because when I look to the future, for the first time since I lost Gabriel and Michael, I can see color. I can imagine joy. I can imagine more. More, he echoed softly. More life, more love, more reasons to wake up in the morning besides just surviving another day. William took her hand, lacing their fingers together. And Elmira, the safety, the clean start. Grace looked at their joined hands, dark against light, calloused from work, but gentle in their touch. I spent 5 years running. I changed cities, changed jobs, changed everything I could. But I never changed what was inside me. I never left the grief behind because I was convinced that letting it go would be betraying my sons. And now? Now I understand that honoring their memory doesn't mean I stop living. It means living fully, loving completely, because that's what they would have wanted for me. She looked at William. That's what Beatrice would have wanted for you, for your girls. He smiled, a true smile that lit up his face. So you'll stay? Grace took a deep breath, letting the weight of the decision finally settle. I'll call my friend tomorrow and decline the offer. I'll stay. But William, she squeezed his hand, we need to do this right. For the girls. We can't rush anything or confuse them about what we are to each other. I completely agree, we'll go slow, no pressure, just, he searched for the right words, just allowing ourselves to discover what this is in its own time. And if it doesn't work out, what if we discover it was just shared trauma, just convenience? Then we'll deal with that when it comes. But Grace, he brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. I don't think that's what this is. I think this is something real, something that can grow into something beautiful if we give it a chance. Before she could answer, they heard a noise from the house. They ran inside to find Mrs. Davies in the kitchen, an envelope in her hand and tears in her eyes. What happened? William asked, alarmed. Nothing bad, the housekeeper said quickly. It's just... She held out the envelope to him. This arrived this morning, but I didn't want to spoil your day. It's from Beatrice. William turned pale. What do you mean from Beatrice? She left it with her lawyer, with instructions to deliver it 6 months after. There's a letter for you and one for the girls. William took the envelope with trembling hands. Grace moved closer, placing a hand on his shoulder for support. Do you want me to leave? She offered. No, he held her arm. Stay, please. With shaking fingers, he opened the envelope. Inside were 2 letters, both in Beatrice's elegant handwriting. One said, For my love, William, and the other, For my little stars. William looked at both, undecided. Yours first, Mrs. Davies suggested gently. The girls are asleep. You can read theirs with them tomorrow. William opened his letter, his eyes scanning the words. Grace and Mrs. Davies stood in respectful silence, giving him privacy even while in the same room. They saw the tears fall, saw his shoulders shake, saw the raw pain cross his face. Finally, he looked up, directly at Grace. She knew. Somehow, she knew. Knew what? Grace asked softly. That you would come. That someone like you would enter our lives. He held the letter out to her. Read it. Please. With hesitant hands, Grace took the letter and read the final words of a woman she would never meet but already deeply admired. And what she read changed everything. Beatrice's letter was written in the shaky handwriting of someone who was weak, but the words were strong, clear, full of the love and wisdom of someone who knew she was leaving. My love, William. If you are reading this, 6 months have passed. 6 months that I imagine have been the hardest of your life. I know you, my darling. I know you've thrown yourself into work, that you've pulled away from the girls because you see my face in them and it hurts too much. I know you're trying to be strong by being distant, when what our daughters need most is for you to be present, vulnerable, human. But I'm not writing to scold you. I'm writing to set you free. William, my love, my death does not have to be the end of all love in your life. I don't want you to spend the next 40 or 50 years alone, tied to a ghost, denying yourself joy because you feel guilty for continuing to live. If there is someone, when you read this, someone who has made you smile again, who has brought light back into our home, who loves our girls and makes them happy, do not push that person away. Don't let fear or guilt or what others will think stop you from being happy. Our daughters need to grow up seeing that it's possible to love deeply, to lose, and still find reasons to love again. They need to learn that our hearts have an infinite capacity, that loving someone new does not diminish the love that came before. You were the love of my life, William. I was blessed beyond words for every moment we spent together. But my life is ending, and yours is not. Your story continues. Our daughters need you to write new chapters, not just endlessly reread the old ones. So, my love, I release you, I give you my blessing, I give you permission to be happy again, and if there is someone special when you read this, someone who has come into our lives and transformed them, be brave. Choose love, choose life, choose joy. Our girls deserve to see their father whole and happy, and you deserve to have a partner who supports you, who loves you, who walks beside you for the years you still have ahead. Love her without guilt, William. Love her with your whole heart. And know that wherever I am, I will be happy seeing you happy. Always yours, eternally grateful for our life together. Beatrice Grace finished reading with tears streaming freely. She folded the letter carefully and handed it back to William, unable to speak. Mrs. Davies was crying openly without any shame. She was always too wise for this world, Mrs. Davies said finally, wiping her face. Always knew exactly what to say. William looked at the letter as if he was seeing a miracle. She knew. Months before she left, she was already preparing me, preparing us, and I was so lost in the pain I couldn't hear. You heard when you were ready, Grace said softly. Some things we can only receive when we are ready for them. He looked at her with such intensity that Grace felt her breath catch. Do you still have doubts? About staying, about us, about anything? Grace thought of all the objections she had raised, all the fears she had harbored. But now, with Beatrice's words echoing in her mind, with the blessing of a woman who loved her family enough to want them to find joy, even after she was gone, the doubts seemed smaller. I still have fears, she admitted, but I no longer have doubts. I'll stay. The smile William gave was transformative. He stood up and pulled her into a hug that was part relief, part celebration, part promise. Grace allowed herself to sink into that hug, feeling for the first time in 5 years that she was home. Mrs. Davies coughed discreetly. I'll leave you two to talk. And William. She took the girl's letter. Tomorrow will be a big day. They will need both of you. When they were alone, William and Grace sat at the kitchen table, just looking at each other for a long moment. So, William began, a smile playing on his lips, since you're staying, we need to discuss your role here. Grace frowned. My role? Well, he took her hand across the table. You're clearly no longer just the maid, so I was thinking official guardian to the girls, house manager, partner in all family decisions. And what about you? Grace asked, courage growing inside her. What's my role in relation to you? William grew serious. Whatever you want it to be, I can wait as long as you need. I can go slow or fast. But I want to be honest, Grace. I've fallen in love with you. I don't know exactly when it happened, but it did. And if you need time to process your own feelings, that's fine. I'll be here. Grace felt her heart race. I don't need time to know that I feel something strong for you too, but I do need time to learn how to do this right, how to build something healthy with you while honoring our past losses. Then we do it together. We learn together. They talked late into the night, planning what the transition would look like, how they would explain it to the girls, how they would establish healthy boundaries while exploring what they were feeling. They were honest about their fears, about the scars they carried, about the possibility of missteps along the way. When Grace finally went up to her room at 2 in the morning, she felt exhausted but hopeful. She lay in bed and looked out the window at the stars. "Gabriel, Michael, you will always be my boys," she whispered to the night. "But I think I finally understand that I can carry you in my heart while making room for new loves. I think you would understand. I think you would even approve." The next morning, Sunday, William gathered the girls in the living room after breakfast. He had Beatrice's letter in his hand, and Grace was by his side as he had asked. "Girls," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion, "I have something very special to share with you. Your mother left a letter for you." The 4 girls grew very still, their eyes wide. Finally, Amelia asked, "From Mommy? For us?" "Yes. She wrote it before she left, to be delivered now. Do you want me to read it?" The girls nodded, huddling close to each other on the sofa. William opened the letter with careful hands and began to read. "My precious little stars, Amelia, Eleanor, Charlotte, Olivia, my 4 blessings, my 4 miracles. If Daddy is reading this to you, it means 6 months have passed since I had to go away. I know these months have been hard. I know you look for me at night, that you miss me when you wake up in the morning, that there are moments when you want to tell me something and remember I'm not there anymore. But I want you to know a few important things. First, I didn't leave you because I wanted to. I left because my body got too tired, too sick to go on. But my love for you, that will never go away. It's in every star in the sky, in every ray of sunshine in the morning, in every hug you give each other. Second, I want you to live. I want you to laugh out loud, to play, to be children. I don't want you to spend your lives being sad because of me. The best way to honor my memory is by being happy, being kind, being yourselves in all your unique and special glory. Third, take care of Daddy. He will have hard days. He will be sad sometimes. But he loves you more than anything in the world. Be patient with him as he learns to be both Daddy and Mommy at the same time. And last, most importantly, if there is someone new in your lives when you read this, someone who takes care of you, who makes you smile, who brings joy back into our home, let that person into your hearts. This is not a betrayal of my love. It is exactly what I wanted, what I prayed would happen. You 4 are capable of infinite love. You can love me in memory and love someone new in the present. You can have your Mommy in the stars and have someone special here on earth. Don't be afraid to love again. Be brave, my little stars. Be kind, be happy, and know that no matter where I am, I will always be with you in every beat of your hearts. With all the love in the universe, Mommy." When William finished reading, his voice was hoarse with emotion. The 4 girls were crying, but they were not just tears of sadness. They were tears of love, of recognition, of a final gift from a mother who knew her daughters deeply. Amelia was the first to move. She looked at Grace with her red but determined eyes. "Mommy was talking about you, wasn't she?" Grace couldn't speak. She just nodded. "So it's true?" Charlotte asked. "You're going to stay and be our bonus mom?" "If you'll have me," Grace finally found her voice. "I will never try to replace your mother, but I would very much like to be a special part of your lives." The 4 girls looked at each other, that silent communication happening once more. Then, as one, they ran to Grace, hugging her all at once with such force they nearly knocked her over. William watched them with tears in his eyes, seeing his family reconfiguring, expanding, learning that love is not finite, that there is always room for more. He joined the hug, wrapping his arms around all of them, and for the first time since Beatrice left, the Blackwood family was whole again. Not in the same way, not without scars, but whole in its new configuration. In that group hug, in that moment of acceptance and love, each of them felt something change. The weight of loss didn't disappear. It never would completely. But now there was something else, something new growing alongside the pain. There was hope. There was joy. There was the promise that better days were coming. And above them, invisible but present, Beatrice smiled, knowing that her final gift to her family had been the permission to be happy again, the blessing to find love even after loss, the courage to write new chapters without forgetting the old ones. The healing, true healing, had finally begun. The next 3 months were a time of adjustment, discovery, and building a new family dynamic. Grace was no longer the maid. William insisted on formalizing her position as guardian and house manager, with a proper salary and clear responsibilities. Mrs. Davies continued as housekeeper, but now she worked alongside Grace rather than supervising her, and the two women developed a solid, affectionate partnership. The most significant change was Grace's room. William insisted she move into one of the suites on the second floor, close to the girls but with privacy and dignity. It was a spacious, bright room with a view of the garden, a world away from the cramped little room on the third floor where she had started. The girls helped her decorate, bringing drawings for the walls, choosing curtains with her, making sure there was space for photos of Gabriel and Michael on the dresser. They understood, with the innocent wisdom of children, that Grace needed to keep her sons present even as she built a new life. The nightmares drastically decreased. Amelia now slept through the night without waking. Charlotte developed a growing interest in astronomy, wanting to learn the real names of the stars that had become so important to them. Eleanor channeled her emotions into dance, having started ballet classes twice a week. And Olivia, who had been the most fragile, now played the piano every day, finding expression through music. William transformed his relationship with work. He was still dedicated, still building impressive buildings all over New York. But now he had boundaries. 6 in the evening was time to come home. Weekends were sacred for the family. And when he had to travel for work, he always took at least one of the girls with him, keeping their bond strong. With Grace, William was patient and respectful. They had dinner together after the girls were asleep, talking for hours about everything and nothing. He told her about Beatrice without weight or guilt, sharing memories that needed to be kept alive. Grace spoke about Gabriel and Michael, about the love that would never die but could now coexist with new feelings. There were casual touches that became less casual, hands that met when passing the salt, glances. That lasted longer than necessary. A kiss on the cheek that landed a little too close to the lips, a growing electricity between them that they both felt, but were careful not to rush. One night, 2 months after Beatrice's letters, William invited her out to dinner, just the two of them. Mrs. Davies would stay with the girls, who were far too excited about having the housekeeper all to themselves to worry about where the adults were going. "Is this a date?" Grace asked as she got ready, nervous as a teenager. "I think it's our first official date," William confirmed, appearing at her door, impeccable in a dark suit. "Although technically we've been living together for months, so maybe we're doing this backwards." Grace laughed, feeling the nervousness dissolve. They went to a discreet restaurant in the West Village, far from the prying eyes of William's social circle. He wanted this night just for them, without judgment or gossip about the widowed businessman dating the former maid. Over dinner, they talked as they never had before. Not about the girls, not about responsibilities or logistics. They talked about dreams, about who they were before the tragedies that shaped them, about who they wanted to be from now on. William told her about how he wanted to expand his construction company into affordable housing projects, to use his wealth to make a real difference. Grace shared her old dream of studying education, a dream abandoned when she got pregnant young, but that she might be able to resume. "When you look at the future now," William asked as they waited for dessert, "what do you see?" Grace thought carefully. "I see 4 girls growing up strong and happy. I see you building not just buildings but legacies. I see myself finally living instead of just surviving. And I see—" She paused, gathering courage. "I see us." William took her hand across the table, lacing their fingers together. "Me too. I see marriage eventually, if you want it. I see you being the girl's official stepmother. I see us building a life together that honors our pasts but isn't defined by them." "Eventually," Grace repeated, smiling. "I like that word. It means there's no rush. 0 rush." He brought her hand to his lips. "We have all the time in the world." The first kiss came that night, in the mansion's garden after they returned. It was dark, the stars shining above them, and William pulled Grace close with such gentleness that she felt tears in her eyes. "May I?" he asked, always respectful, always careful. "Yes," she whispered. The kiss was soft, tender, full of promise. It wasn't urgent or desperate. It was the kiss of two people who had weathered storms and found harbor in each other. When they parted, they were both crying and smiling at the same time. From a second-floor window, 4 girls watched and celebrated silently, holding hands and jumping with contained joy. Mrs. Davies, who was with them, just shook her head with a smile. Beatrice would have thoroughly approved. In the following weeks, William and Grace didn't hide their relationship from the girls, but they didn't make a big deal of it either. They were more open with affection, kissing casually on the cheek, holding hands during dinners, sitting closer on the sofa during Friday night movies. The girls accepted it naturally, without drama or jealousy. After all, they had been the ones to plant the seed of this possibility from the beginning. Amelia occasionally drew the family, now with 7 people, always including Beatrice floating above as a protective angel. The girl's 6th birthday was approaching, and William wanted to do something special, not a big party with hundreds of guests like Beatrice used to organize, but something intimate, meaningful, that celebrated not just their birthday but also how much they had all grown and healed. He sat down with Grace one night to plan. "What do you think of a garden party?" he suggested. "A star theme, since that's become so important to all of us." Grace loved the idea. They began planning together, a natural partnership. Glow-in-the-dark decorations, a telescope to see the real stars, a cake shaped like a constellation, invitations only for the few people close to the girls. But William had another surprise planned, something he had been preparing for weeks, working with technicians and experts. He wanted to give his daughters and Grace something they would never forget. Mrs. Davies was in on the secret, and Charlotte almost found out when she caught her father researching star names on the computer. But he made up an excuse about a work project and she accepted it. The week of the birthday, the house was buzzing with preparations. The girls were excited. Mrs. Davies was rushing around organizing details, and Grace was trying to maintain some order in the joyful chaos. One afternoon, 3 days before the birthday, Grace found William in his study looking at old photos. They were pictures of Beatrice when she was pregnant, so young and radiant, her enormous belly carrying 4 babies. 6 years, he said, when he noticed Grace at the door. "It feels like a lifetime, and just yesterday at the same time." Grace came in and sat beside him. "Do you miss her?" "Every day, but differently now. Before it was a missing that paralyzed me. Now it's a missing I can carry while I continue living. She would be so proud of the girls, of you. I think she would be." William turned to Grace. "And I think she would be happy knowing I found you. That the girls found you." Grace kissed him softly. "I'm grateful every day for that job ad, for being the only candidate willing to take a maid position in a house with 4 traumatized children." William laughed. "Best hire I ever made." The afternoon turned into evening as they continued talking, planning not just the birthday but also the future. William casually mentioned that he had spoken to a lawyer about adoption, that when the time was right, if Grace wanted, she could legally adopt the girls, becoming their mother in the eyes of the law. Grace was speechless. The idea touched her deeply, but it also frightened her. Being a stepmother was one thing. Being a legal mother was another. "You don't have to decide now," William said quickly. "It's just something to think about, but I want you to know it's possible when you're ready." "Thank you," was all. She could manage, too emotional for more words. That night, after everyone was asleep, Grace went to the garden to talk to her stars. "Gabriel, Michael," she whispered to the sky, "you will always be my first children, my babies, my heart. But I think my heart is big enough now for 4 little girls, too. I think I can be a mother again without betraying your memory. What do you think?" A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the apple tree, and Grace chose to interpret it as approval. She smiled through her tears, feeling at peace. The day of the birthday dawned clear and beautiful. The girls woke up excited, running around the second floor in matching pajamas that Grace had bought especially. 6 years old, no longer babies but little girls, each with a strong personality and her own dreams. The day was filled with final preparations, laughter, a small organized chaos. Guests began to arrive in the late afternoon. Not many, just the most important people. A few of the girls' school friends with their parents, the art teacher they adored, Beatrice's old pediatrician who kept in touch with the family, and a few distant cousins William had recently reconnected with. But the real party would begin after sunset, when the stars started to appear, when William would reveal his special surprise, a surprise that would change everything once more, that would seal this reconfigured family once and for all, that would show the 4 girls and Grace how much they were loved. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, William took Grace's hand and whispered in her ear, "Are you ready?" "For what?" "For the next chapter of our lives." And Grace, looking at this man she had learned to love so unexpectedly, at the 4 girls who had stolen her heart, at the house that had become a home, smiled and replied, "I always have been." The garden was transformed into a celestial fairy tale. Glow-in-the-dark lights hung from the trees, creating artificial constellations among the branches. Tables were decorated with dark blue cloths sprinkled with silver stars. The cake, a work of art shaped like a spiral galaxy, held a place of honor on the main table. And in the center of the garden, covered by a dark cloth, was William's surprise. The 4 girls were radiant in blue dresses with sparkling details, each dress slightly different to reflect their personalities. Amelia had embroidered stars, Charlotte had crescent moons, Eleanor had comets, and Olivia had delicate constellations. Grace had spent weeks choosing every detail with the girls, making sure each one felt special. When the last ray of sun disappeared and the first star appeared in the sky, William called for everyone's attention. The guests gathered around, the girls in front, Grace beside William. "Today my daughters turn 6, he began, his voice emotional but steady. 6 years since 4 miracles came into the world and completely transformed my life and their mother's life. The last 12 months have been the hardest we've ever faced, but they've also taught us important lessons about love, loss, and the human heart's capacity to heal." The girls listened to him with rapt attention, as they always did when their father spoke from the heart. "Today, I want to give you 4 a special gift, something I hope you'll carry forever." He signaled, and 2 men began to remove the cover from the mysterious object in the center of the garden. A professional telescope was revealed, large and impressive, mounted on a solid base. But it's not just a telescope. William pulled an envelope from his pocket. "Through an international organization, I have registered 4 stars in your names. Real, catalogued stars that now officially belong to Amelia Blackwood, Eleanor Blackwood, Charlotte Blackwood, and Olivia Blackwood." The girls' jaws dropped. The guests murmured in admiration. Grace felt tears welling up. "But I didn't stop there," William continued, now looking at Grace, "because there is another star that needs to be recognized." He pulled out another certificate. "For Grace Evans, the woman who came into our lives when we needed her most, who taught us to look up at the sky again, who showed us that it's possible to love through pain. Your star is registered alongside theirs, forming a constellation I've named Family." Grace covered her mouth with her hands, completely overcome with emotion. William moved closer, taking her hands. "And there is one more star in this constellation," he said, his voice breaking, "for Beatrice Blackwood, who will always be the brightest star guiding us all. Hers is registered in the center, surrounded by her daughters and by you, forming a complete circle." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. The girls ran to hug their father and Grace at the same time. Mrs. Davies was crying openly. Even the guests who barely knew the full story were moved. When everyone had calmed down, William invited each girl to look through the telescope. He had programmed it to focus on Venus, the brightest planet visible that night, explaining that although their registered stars were too far away to see, that light represented all the lights that held their memories. One by one, The girls looked, mesmerized. Then it was Grace's turn. When she put her eye to the lens and saw that bright point of light, she felt something complete within her. It wasn't the end of pain, but it was acceptance. It was peace with the past and hope for the future. The party continued with genuine joy. The children played, the adults chatted. The cake was cut to applause. The girls blew out 6 candles together, each making a secret wish, though Grace suspected the wishes were very similar. That this happiness would continue, that their new family would stay together, that they would never feel alone again. When most of the guests had left, and only the closest remained, Charlotte asked a question they all clearly wanted to ask. "Daddy, Grace, are you going to get married?" The garden fell silent. William and Grace looked at each other, surprised by the directness of the question. "Why do you ask that, sweetie?" Grace asked gently. "Because you love each other," Charlotte replied with the simple logic of a 6-year-old. "We can see it. And when people love each other, they get married. The teacher said so." "Do you want us to get married?" William asked, looking at the 4 of them. The girls looked at each other, that silent communication they always had. Then Amelia, always the spokesperson, answered, "We want you to be happy. If getting married makes you happy, then yes. But," she hesitated, biting her lower lip, "Mummy will always be our real mommy, right?" "Always," Grace said firmly, kneeling to be at their level. "Nothing and no one can change that. Your mother gave you life, loved you before you were even born, shaped who you are. I could never replace that. I don't want to. I just want to be an addition, not a replacement." "Like a bonus mom?" Olivia asked, using the phrase they had coined months ago. "Exactly, like a bonus mom." "Okay then," Eleanor said, ever the practical one. "You can get married." The adults laughed at the direct approval, but the question hung in the air even after the children went to bed. William and Grace remained in the garden side by side, looking at the stars through the telescope. "They have a point," William said eventually. "We do love each other." "We do," Grace agreed. "But marriage is a big step. It's public. It's permanent. Do you have doubts?" "Not about you, not about my feelings, but about the timing, about what people will say, about whether it's too soon." William turned to her, taking both her hands. "Grace, we already live together. We already raise daughters together. We've already been through hell together and come out the other side. What is marriage but an official recognition of what we already have?" "And Beatrice?" Grace asked. It always came back to that. "She will still be your wife in the eyes of history, the mother of your daughters, your first love. And she always will be. But she set me free, remember? She gave me permission, her blessing even, to find love again, to build a new life." William touched Grace's face with infinite tenderness. "And I found that in you. I found a partner, a companion, a woman I love deeply. I want to marry you, Grace. Not tomorrow, not next week, but when you're ready. When you know it's what you want too." Grace closed her eyes, letting the tears fall. When she opened them again, there was certainty in them. "I want to. I want to marry you. I want to be the official stepmother to these incredible girls. I want to build a life with you. I just need time to process, to do it right." "How much time do you need?" Grace thought. 6 months, she suggested. "Time for the girls to adjust more to the idea, for me to resolve some things from my past, for us to plan something that honors both Beatrice and us. 6 months is perfect. So it's a yes?" "It's a yes." William pulled her into a deep kiss, sealing the promise. They didn't make a public announcement immediately. They wanted to keep that moment for themselves, to let the decisions settle, but the girls, perceptive as always, noticed the change. They noticed the secret smiles, the more frequent touches, the way the 2 adults seemed to float rather than walk. A week after the birthday, during a family dinner, Amelia decided to force the issue. "So," she said casually while eating pasta, "when's the wedding?" William nearly choked on his water. "How do you know there's going to be a wedding?" "Please, Daddy." Charlotte rolled her eyes with wisdom beyond her 6 years. "You're not subtle," Grace laughed, giving up the pretense. "In 6 months. We want to do something small, intimate, just the closest people." "Here in the garden," Eleanor suggested excitedly. "Under the stars." "Actually," William said, exchanging a look with Grace, "that's exactly what we were thinking." The girls cheered as if they had won the lottery. They immediately started planning, suggesting colors, flowers, songs. It was chaotic and loud and absolutely perfect. Mrs. Davies, who had heard everything from the kitchen, appeared at the door with tears in her eyes. "Beatrice would have thoroughly approved," she said simply. "You have my blessing too." In the following months, the house buzzed with preparations, but they weren't stressful preparations. They were joyful, collaborative, familiar. The girls helped choose flowers. Grace and William selected music together. Mrs. Davies coordinated catering with motherly love. Grace also made an important decision. She enrolled in an evening education course, resuming her old dream. William supported her completely, rearranging his evenings to be with the girls when she was studying. The girls continued to thrive. Amelia discovered a love for drawing and started classes with a local artist. Charlotte devoured books, already reading above her grade level. Eleanor shone in ballet, her small body expressing emotions that words couldn't. And Olivia composed little melodies on the piano, each note telling stories her heart held. 3 months before the wedding, Grace took flowers to the cemetery where Gabriel and Michael were buried. It was the first time she had returned since moving to New York. She knelt between the 2 small headstones, placing fresh flowers on each. "My boys," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "I know it's been a while since I've been here, not because I've forgotten you. I could never forget. But because I've finally managed to keep living, I've found reasons to smile again." She told them about William, about the girls, about the planned wedding. "I hope you understand, I hope you approve. You will always be my first children, my babies, my heart. But I've learned that a heart can love many, that there's no limit to the love we can give and receive." She stayed there for hours, talking, remembering, crying and laughing. When she finally stood up to leave, she felt lighter. It wasn't a goodbye. It was an integration. It was bringing all the parts of herself into the present, honoring the past while embracing the future. When she returned home that night, William was waiting for her at the door. He saw in her eyes where she had been. He just held her, no questions, no demands, just love and acceptance. The wedding approached, and with it, a new beginning for everyone. Not a beginning that erased what came before, but a beginning that honored everything, included everything, celebrated the human capacity to love through loss, to find light even in the deepest darkness. The day of the wedding dawned with a clear, starry sky even before the sun rose. Grace woke early, nervous and excited at the same time. She hadn't slept in the room that was now hers, but in a guest room, keeping the tradition of the bride and groom not seeing each other before the ceremony. The girls had insisted, saying it was important to follow some traditions. The 4 girls invaded her room at 7 in the morning, still in their pajamas, bringing breakfast in bed that they had prepared with Mrs. Davies's help. Heart-shaped pancakes, strawberries, freshly squeezed orange juice. The affection in every detail was palpable. "Today, you're going to be our real bonus mom," Amelia said, climbing onto the bed beside her. "I'm already real in my feelings," Grace corrected gently. "The wedding is just paper." "But it's important paper," Charlotte argued. "It means you've promised to stay forever." "And I promise." Grace hugged the 4 of them. "No matter what happens, I'm not abandoning you. I'm here to stay." The hours before the ceremony passed in a whirlwind of preparations. A hairdresser and makeup artist came to the house, transforming Grace and the girls. Grace's dress was simple but elegant, creamy white with discreet lace details, chosen not to be too ostentatious. After all, it was a second marriage, a new beginning, not an absolute start. The girls wore lavender-colored dresses, each with a unique detail reflecting her personality. They were the flower girls, a role they took extremely seriously. Mrs. Davies helped them get ready, laughing at their jokes, wiping away tears of emotion, being the grandmother they didn't have but that she had become. In the garden, under the direction of a decorator William had hired, the space was transformed again. An arch covered in white and lilac flowers, chairs arranged in a semicircle, a table for the cake and champagne, and above it all discreet lights that would begin to glow as night fell, recreating a starry sky even under the real one. William waited at the arch, impeccable in a grey suit, his heart pounding. Beside him stood his best friend from college, serving as his witness. On the other side, Mrs. Davies stood as Grace's witness, an honour the housekeeper had accepted with tears. There were few guests, only 20 people, close family, intimate friends, the girls' teachers, the doctor who had cared for Beatrice, people who were a real part of their lives. William had been clear he didn't want a social event. He wanted a celebration of love. When the music began, a soft piano instrumental. The 4 girls came down first, scattering rose petals on the path. They walked slowly, serious with their responsibility. When they reached the arch, they positioned themselves 2 on each side, creating a living aisle for Grace to walk through. Then she appeared, alone with no one to give her away, because Grace belonged to herself before she belonged to anyone else. She walked through the garden that had become so important to all of them, passing between her 4 precious girls, until she reached the man she had chosen to love again. William had tears in his eyes when she got close. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "You too." The officiant, a family friend who was a justice of the peace, conducted a short but meaningful ceremony. He spoke of love that persists through loss, of families formed not just by blood but by choice, of the courage to start over when it would be easier to give up. William and Grace had written their own vows. William went first, his voice steady despite the emotion. "Grace, you came into my life when I was drowning, when I could barely breathe from the pain, when I had forgotten how to be a father, how to be human beyond a work machine. You taught me to look up again, to see stars instead of just darkness. Most importantly, you taught me that honoring the past doesn't mean being stuck in it. I promise to love you with all that I am. I promise to be your partner in every sense. I promise to build a life with you that honors everyone we have loved and lost while celebrating everything we still have. I promise to be a better father because you showed me how, and I promise every day to choose you, to choose us, to choose love." Grace wiped away her tears before beginning her own vows. "William, when I came to this house, I was running from pain, from memory, from myself. I thought I could never love again, that my heart had broken irreparably when I lost my sons. But you and your girls showed me that the human heart has an infinite capacity, that we can carry loss and love at the same time, that we can honor those we've lost while loving those we have. I promise to be your partner, your companion, your friend. I promise to love your daughters as my own, not replacing their mother, but adding my love to hers. I promise to stand by your side in good days and bad, in joys and sorrows. And I promise to never let any of us forget to look at the stars, because that's where we find hope." There wasn't a dry eye. The girls were crying openly. Mrs. Davies was sobbing into her handkerchief. The guests were dabbing discreetly at their tears. "By the authority vested in me," the officiant said, smiling, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." The kiss was soft, a promise sealed, a new chapter begun. And when they parted, the 4 girls ran to hug them, creating a group hug that perfectly symbolized what this family had become. The celebration that followed was joyful and intimate, a delicious dinner prepared by a chef Mrs. Davies had personally overseen, a 3-tiered cake with edible stars, champagne for the adults, special juice for the children, music, laughter, dancing. Amelia had prepared a speech, which she read with the seriousness of a miniature adult. "On behalf of my sisters, I want to say that we are very happy that Grace is now officially part of our family. She taught us not to be afraid of the dark, because there are always stars. She taught us that loving someone new doesn't mean forgetting who we loved before. And she taught us that family isn't just who you're born with, but who chooses to stay with you." There was no applause, just emotional hugs. When night fell completely and the garden lights created an artificial starry sky, William asked for attention once more. He had one last surprise. When Beatrice left, she left something besides the letters. She left videos, messages recorded for important moments in the girls' lives. He looked at the four of them, and today she left a message for all of us, for this exact moment. He projected a video onto a white wall they had prepared, and there was Beatrice, so alive on the screen, even though everyone knew she was already gone. She was weak, visibly ill, but her eyes shone with a fierce love. "If you are watching this," she began, "it means William has found someone special, someone willing to love my girls, to be his partner, to help our family continue. And I want to say a few things to this person, whoever she may be." She looked directly at the camera, as if she could see through time. "Thank you. Thank you for seeing beauty where there was only pain. Thank you for having the courage to love when it would have been easier to keep your distance. Thank you for giving my daughters an example that it's possible to start over, that love doesn't end, it just transforms and multiplies. You are not replacing anyone, you are adding. And that is a precious gift for which I don't know how to thank you enough." Beatrice turned to where she knew William would be. "My love, be happy. You deserve it. And girls," she smiled, tears in her eyes but joy on her face, "love her as she loves you. Let her completely into your hearts. And always remember that you can love many, that a heart is never too full for more love." The video ended with Beatrice blowing a kiss to the camera. The silence that followed was heavy with emotion, but not sadness. It was an emotion of gratitude, of a blessing received, of permission granted to be fully happy. Grace was crying openly, as was everyone else. William pulled her into a tight hug. The girls joined in, and there they stood, a family united not despite their losses, but through them, shaped by them, stronger because of them. The rest of the night was pure celebration. They danced under real and artificial stars. They ate too much cake. They laughed until their sides hurt. They made toast after toast to love, to family, to life that goes on even after it seems impossible. When the guests had finally left and the girls were asleep, Grace and William stood in the garden, exactly where it had all begun so many months ago. "We did it," Grace said, leaning against him. "We built something beautiful from the ruins. Not just us." He kissed the top of her head. 6 people, all carrying impossible losses, all learning to live again. It's a miracle when you stop to think about it. It's love. Love that persists, that transforms, that heals. They looked at the stars together, those distant lights that had become so meaningful. Up there were Beatrice, Gabriel, and Michael watching over all of them. And down here were William, Grace, Amelia, Eleanor, Charlotte, and Olivia, living, loving, proving that it's possible to find light even after the deepest darkness. It wasn't a perfect happy ending. There would still be difficult days, moments of longing, unexpected tears, but it was a beginning. It was a solid foundation. It was a family chosen and forged, love won and deserved, a life worth living. And under those stars, in that garden where so many tears had fallen and so much laughter had echoed, William and Grace made a silent promise to always honor those they had lost, to always love those they had, to teach the girls that the human heart has an infinite capacity for love, loss, healing, and new beginnings. Because in the end, that's what we all need to learn. That love doesn't end, it just transforms. And sometimes, if we are very lucky and very brave, it multiplies in ways we never imagined possible. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of William, Grace, and the 4 little stars has touched your hearts as deeply as it touched ours in creating it. This journey of love, loss, and new beginnings reminds us that even on the darkest nights, there are always stars guiding us back home. If this narrative resonated with you, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell for notifications of new stories. Leave a like if you were moved, and in the comments share with us your own stories of overcoming adversity and of love that persists. Who knows, your story might inspire others who are going through similar storms. Every day we bring you narratives that celebrate the complexity of human life, that honor our pain while celebrating our capacity to keep loving. You are part of this community of hearts that believe in the transformative power of love. Until the next story, and always remember to look at the stars.